You don't usually lose a war to weather, but in the winter of 1944, the cold almost did what bullets couldn't. This isn't a story about hero charges or firefights. It's about frozen feet, bad gear, and how soldiers stayed alive when the system meant to protect them quietly collapsed. And here's the twist. Most of the men who survived didn't do it because they were tougher.
They survived because they figured something out that no manual had taught them. Imagine this.
It's 3 a.m. Pitch black. Snow falling sideways. You're standing in a foxhole so cold it doesn't feel cold anymore, it just feels empty. At first, your feet go numb. That almost feels like relief. Then, nothing. No pain. No warmth. No feeling at all.
And that's when it gets dangerous. By the winter of 1944, American soldiers were digging into the forests around Bastogne, Belgium. They expected German tanks. They expected artillery. What they didn't expect was that the cold would hit harder than either. One soldier later said, "I stopped feeling my feet before sunrise. By dawn, I couldn't bend my fingers."
36 hours later, he still hadn't moved. No rotation, no relief, no way out. When they finally pulled him off the line days later, the medic didn't ask questions. He reached for a saw.
This wasn't a combat wound. This was frostbite. And it was everywhere. Here's the part nobody likes to talk about. Thousands of American casualties during the Battle of the Bulge weren't caused by German fire.
They were caused by cold injuries, frostbite, trench foot, hypothermia, and most of it didn't need to happen.
But why did it? Because the gear failed. And when the gear failed, soldiers had to invent their own way to survive.
And what they came up with sounds almost ridiculous until you understand why it worked. But to get there, we need to talk about a jacket and a pair of boots that quietly crippled an army.
Let's start with the jacket. The standard U.S. Army field jacket in 1944 was called the M1941, nicknamed the Parsons jacket.
On paper, it looked fine. In practice, it was basically a fall coat. Army tests had already confirmed it. Too thin, too light, not built for European winters.
The engineers knew this. In fact, they had already designed a better one, the M1943 field jacket.
Heavier, smarter layers, actually warm. So what went wrong? Distribution.
The war moved faster than logistics. Thousands of the improved jackets sat in warehouses while men froze at the front.
Soldiers would joke, darkly, that their winter gear was on the way.
That joke stopped being funny once fingers started turning black. But the jacket wasn't the real killer. The boots were.
Standard issue combat boots were designed for one pair of socks. But official guidance told soldiers to wear two.
Times 3 pairs of wool socks in winter. Sounds smart, right? More layers equals more warmth. Except it doesn't work like that.
Extra socks inside tight boots compress your feet. Compression cuts blood flow. No blood flow means no heat. Feet swelled. Skin split. Purple turned to black. And once gangrene set in,
There was no saving it. Thousands of amputations followed. Even worse, Army investigators later admitted something brutal. Following official instructions actually increased cold injuries. Meanwhile, British troops fighting in the same forests, in the same cold, had almost no trench foot cases. Same winter.
same conditions, different doctrine, different gear. So American soldiers did what humans always do when systems fail. They improvised.
And the first solution came from the most unexpected place. Paper.
Somewhere near Bastogne, an American officer tore apart a German propaganda leaflet. Not to read it, to stuff it into his jacket.
He crumpled the paper tightly, packed it into his liner, down his trousers, around his feet. Other soldiers copied him. At first, it sounded stupid. Paper? Really? But then, something strange happened. They felt warmer. Not cozy, not comfortable, but warmer enough to survive the night. Here's why that worked. Warmth doesn't come from fabric. It comes from air.
Wool, cotton, feathers, none of them generate heat. They just trap air, so your body heat can't escape.
Crumpled paper does the same thing. When you crush paper, you create thousands of tiny air pockets.
Those pockets block heat from escaping. Same principle as home insulation. Same principle as sleeping bags.
During the Great Depression, families stuffed newspaper into walls because they couldn't afford real insulation.
Now that same trick was keeping soldiers alive. Across Europe, printed material became survival gear.
German newspapers, French magazines, maps, anything that could be crumpled.
But paper had one enemy: water. Snow melted, sweat condensed, paper collapsed. Once wet, it lost its insulating power almost instantly. So soldiers had to replace it constantly. And even then, paper only helped above the waist. The real danger was below. Because the cold didn't just come from the air, it came from the ground. And the ground was ruthless. Here's something people don't realize. Frozen ground steals heat faster than freezing air.
When your body touches frozen earth, heat drains straight out of you through conduction. No wind required.
No snowfall needed, just contact. Lie down wrong, and hypothermia can start in under 2 hours. So soldiers became engineers. They started reading the landscape differently. Straw? Gold. Pine boughs? Good. Dry leaves? Better than nothing.
They called it a ground heat trap. The method was simple but strict. Gather organic material, spread it at least 6 inches thick, then cross-layer it.
Why cross-layer? Because straight layers compress. Compression kills air pockets. Cross-layering keeps loft, and loft keeps warmth.
Veterans learned the rule fast. If you can feel the ground, you didn't build enough. When organic material wasn't available,
They worked with dirt itself, layering soil deliberately, creating small air gaps, keeping the body off the frozen crust. And then came the next realization. If the ground above you is deadly, what about the ground below you? So they went underground. A dugout wasn't just protection from shells, it was a thermal machine. Underground, temperature stays stable. Not warm, but steady. The earth works like a giant battery.
It absorbs heat slowly and loses it slowly. Go down about 3 feet, and the temperature barely changes day to night.
But not all soil was equal. Chalk drained well, dry, survivable.
Clay was a nightmare. Water pooled. Cold clung.
Trenchfoot exploded. Soldiers learned to tell the difference by touch, by smell, by instinct.
The Germans formalized this approach as doctrine, feldmäßiger Ausbau.
Build with what the land gives you. No aesthetics, no comfort, just survival. One of the most extreme examples was the Franja Partisan Hospital in Yugoslavia. Hidden inside a narrow gorge,
13 underground buildings, operating rooms, generators, over 500 wounded treated, never discovered.
When survival depends on staying hidden and warm, You don't just build shelter. You disappear into the landscape.
But even the best shelter meant nothing without fuel, because the real fire was inside the body, and it burned fast.
In freezing conditions, the human body needs up to 3,000 calories a day just to stay warm.
That's before fighting, before marching, before digging. Food wasn't optional, it was fuel.
The army tried to help. In 1942, they issued a requirement. A stove that could work from -60 degrees Fahrenheit to 125 Fahrenheit. Burn any fuel available.
Coleman delivered. The M1942 pocket stove weighed 3 pounds and burned almost anything liquid.
Gasoline, kerosene, diesel, captured enemy fuel. Ernie Pyle called it second only to the Jeep in importance.
But there was a problem. Fire meant visibility. A warm meal could also mean incoming artillery.
So stoves were used sparingly. Quick heat, then dark.
German Esbit stoves burned solid tablets. British Tommy cookers used gel fuel. Different designs, same limitation.
They couldn't solve the long, frozen hours in foxholes.
So survival shifted again, away from gear, toward behavior, toward discipline. Here's the uncomfortable truth the Army learned too late. Cold injuries weren't just about equipment. They were about habits. Post-war reports didn't sugarcoat it. Trench foot spread because units failed to enforce prevention. So leaders cracked down. Feet inspections, sock rotation, hydration checks. Relentless. Propaganda posters showed graphic images of gangrene. This is trench foot. Prevent it. Shock worked.
A soldier with frozen feet was as useless as a broken rifle. Except a rifle could be fixed. Feet couldn't.
And then came the most intimate survival tactic of all. Sharing body heat. Two bodies generate something one body can't. A microclimate.
Inside a confined space, combined body heat can raise temperature by 15 to 20 degrees.
Not because you double output, but because heat accumulates.
Soldiers rotated watch. One stayed awake, one slept. Then they switched. The space never fully cooled. Rank didn't matter. Officers slept shoulder to shoulder with enlisted men. Physics didn't care about hierarchy.
Rangers formalized buddy checks. Feet, hands, hydration.
When exhaustion set in, the system carried them. Not morale, not bravery, structure.
And that's how they made it. Not comfortably, not heroically, but alive.
The winter of 1944 didn't just test soldiers. It exposed failures at every level.
So the men adapted. Paper became insulation. Straw became bedding. Earth became shelter. Discipline became armor. They survived not because the system worked, but because they worked around it. The warmth that mattered most didn't come from technology. It came from each other. And that lesson, it still matters. Because when systems fail, whether in war, disasters,
or life, it's improvisation, discipline, and human connection that keep people alive.
And if you want more stories like this, where history meets real survival, hit subscribe, drop a comment, and stay with us.
Because sometimes, the deadliest enemy isn't the one shooting at you.